At 9:47 p.m., Bumpy Johnson took one bite of a perfect ribeye and knew someone had just tried to kill him. Not with a gun, not with poison, but with ground glass hidden inside his steak, right there in a crowded Harlem restaurant. He didn't spit it out, didn't flinch, didn't let a single person notice, because 15 years in federal prison had taught him one rule. If you react, you die. Someone in that kitchen wanted him to bleed out slowly, silently, in front of everyone who mattered. Someone who had been waiting 6 years for this moment. Bumpy walked out smiling, with the evidence in his napkin and a clock in his head. 24 hours. That's how long he gave himself to find who did it and decide whether they would leave Harlem alive. And what he did to the man responsible, it didn't involve bullets. It was colder than that. The Cadillac idled at the curb like a patient animal, engine purring low, the streetlights of Harlem sliding across its polished black skin. Bumpy Johnson stepped out of the Red Rooster Supper Club at exactly 10:04 p.m., his expression calm, his posture unhurried, the picture of a man who had just enjoyed a fine dinner. Inside his jacket pocket was a folded white napkin. Inside that napkin was proof that someone had decided tonight was the night Harlem would bury its king. Curtis, his driver, opened the rear door and waited. He'd been driving Bumpy for 3 years now, long enough to read the man without words. Tonight, something was wrong. Not panic, not fear, something sharper. Focus. Bumpy slid into the back seat and shut the door himself. Home, he said quietly. The car pulled away from the curb, tires whispering against wet pavement. Neither man spoke for several blocks. Harlem moved around them, couples laughing outside bars, a bus coughing smoke at the corner, music leaking from an upstairs window, but inside the Cadillac, time felt slower, heavier. Curtis glanced at the rearview mirror. You didn't touch your dessert, sir. Bumpy smiled faintly. Lost my appetite. They reached the brownstone on 127th Street. At 10:32 p.m., Curtis stepped out first and opened the door, expecting the usual nod, the usual measured stride up the steps. Instead, Bumpy paused halfway out of the car. Curtis, he said. Yes, sir. Get Juno Brown. And Nat Pettigrew. Curtis stiffened. Those names didn't come up unless something had gone badly wrong. Tonight, within the hour. Curtis hesitated. Everything all right, Mr. Johnson? Bumpy looked at him then, really looked at him. The streetlight caught his eyes, and Curtis felt a chill crawl up his spine. He'd seen those eyes only once before, years ago, when word came down that Dutch Schultz had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Someone tried to kill me tonight, Bumpy said calmly. At dinner, in front of God and everybody. Curtis nodded once. He was already backing toward the car. Yes, sir. Inside the brownstone, Mamie Johnson sat in the parlor with a book resting unopened in her lap. She knew her husband's footsteps. She knew the rhythm of them. Tonight they were slower. She looked up as Bumpy entered. Ellsworth, she said. What happened? He didn't answer right away. He removed his coat, hung it neatly, then reached into the inside pocket. When he unfolded the napkin on the coffee table, Mamie's breath caught in her throat. The steak sat there in ruined dignity, half-chewed, slick with saliva, dotted with tiny shards that glinted under the lamp like crushed diamonds. Ground glass, Bumpy said. In my ribeye? Mamie pressed a hand to her mouth. Lord have mercy. I didn't swallow, he continued. Not enough to matter. She stared at the napkin. Who would? That's what I'm going to find out. He lowered himself into the chair across from her, the first crack in his armor all night. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere distant. Clarence cooked it himself, Bumpy said finally. Brought it to the table. Watch me eat. Mamie's eyes widened. Clarence? He's been feeding you for years. 6, Bumpy said. Every Thursday. She searched his face. Do you think it was him? I think someone wanted me dead, Bumpy replied. Whether Clarence held the knife or just the plate, that part comes later. By midnight, the brownstone no longer felt like a home. It felt like headquarters. Juno Brown arrived first, coat still dusted with cold, hands heavy and scarred from a lifetime of violence, done clean and quiet. He listened without interrupting as Bumpy laid out the facts, the steak, the glass, the restraint it had taken not to react. When Bumpy finished, Juno exhaled through his nose. Poisons for cowards, he said. Poisons for people who want you dead without getting blood on their hands, Bumpy replied. Nat Pettigrew arrived 20 minutes later, slipping into the room like a shadow. Thin, unremarkable, forgettable. Exactly the kind of man who knew everything worth knowing. I want every name from that kitchen, Bumpy said. Cooks, dishwashers, busboys. I want debts, grudges, secrets. I want to know who's been talking to strangers. Juno cracked his knuckles. You want me to start bringing them in? Bumpy shook his head. Not yet. First we listen. He turned to Nat, the Red Rooster. Who really owns it? Nat didn't miss a beat. Earl Washington on paper. But the liquor license came through Italian hands. Costello's people greased the wheels back in '54. Bumpy nodded slowly. Frank Costello had been sniffing around Harlem for years, testing boundaries, probing for weakness. Any new faces lately? Bumpy asked. Net hesitate. There's a name. Vincent Tagley goes by Vinny Eyes. He's been uptown more than usual. Buying drinks. Talking. Making friends. Building something, Bumpy said. Net noted. That's how it looks. The room went quiet. Pieces were moving, sliding into place. Not yet a picture, but the outline of one. Start with the kitchen, Bumpy said. By morning, I want to know which one of them had a reason to hate me enough to risk dying for it. November 15th came gray and cold. Nat returned just after dawn with a folder thick with lives reduced to paper. 12 names. 12 stories. Most of them small, clean, unremarkable. But 3 stood out. Marcus Bell, dishwasher. $400 owed to a loan shark on 142nd. Joy May Franklin, prep cook. Brother doing time at Rikers. And Clarence Mosley, head chef. No hits, no vices, no visible pressure points. But one note, written smaller than the rest. Brother deceased. 1953. Bumpy tapped the page. Tell me about this. Ned shifted. Delroy Mosley. 19. Beaten behind a grocery store on Lenox. Died 3 days later. By who? Nat didn't answer. Juno's jaw tightened. Bumpy looked up slowly. By who, Nat? Your boys, Nat said quietly. Back then, they were looking for someone else. The room went still. Bumpy leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on nothing. I never knew, he said. It was handled, Nat replied. Funeral paid for. Family told it was random. 8 years, Bumpy murmured. 8 years is a long time to wait. And suddenly, the steak made sense. The glass made sense. The patience made sense. Clarence Mosley hadn't been cooking meals. He'd been sharpening a knife. By mid-morning, Harlem knew something was wrong. Not because anyone had spoken out loud, but because the air felt watched. Men stood a little straighter on corners. Conversations ended when unfamiliar footsteps passed. Doors that were usually open stayed, closed a second longer. When Bumpy Johnson started asking questions, the city answered, even if it didn't want to. Clarence Mosley hadn't shown up for work. That was the first confirmation. For 6 years, Clarence had been early. Earlier than the delivery trucks. Earlier than the coffee. A man who believed kitchens were sacred places, where discipline mattered. Now his station at the Red Rooster sat untouched. Knives cleaned and aligned like soldiers waiting for a war that wasn't coming. Nat Pettigrew stood across the street, watching through the restaurant's front windows. He didn't need to go inside. Absence told its own story. At 11:18 a.m., one of Nat's runners came back breathing hard. Clarence packed a bag, the kid said. Rooming house on 143rd. Landlady says he paid cash. Left before sunrise. Ned noted. Anyone with him? No. That made it worse. A man running alone wasn't just scared. He was committed. Nat brought the information back to the brownstone just after noon. Bumpy listened without interrupting, fingers steepled, eyes calm. He knows I survived, Bumpy said. Yes. He knows he failed. Yes. And now he's trying to disappear. Ned hesitated. There's something else. Bumpy looked up. Vinny Eyes, Ned said. He was seen last night. Social club on 116th. Left early. Real early. Bumpy leaned back. So he lit the match, he said, and stepped away from the fire. That was how the Italians worked when they were smart. They didn't pull triggers. They found men who already wanted blood, then pointed them in the right direction and waited. Bumpy stood and moved to the window. Outside, Harlem breathed, kids running late for school, shopkeepers lifting gates, a preacher arguing with God on the corner. A city built on routines. Clarence Mosley had shattered one. "Find Vinny Eyes," Bumpy said. "Don't touch him. I want to know who he talked to, where he ate, who poured his drinks." Ned nodded. "Already moving." "And Clarence," Bumpy added. "I want him found before sunset." Juno Brown took that assignment personally. By early afternoon, his men were fanned across Upper Harlem like a tightening net. Bus stations, cheap hotels, churches, any place a man with shaking hands and a guilty conscience might hide. At 2:47 p.m., Juno found Bumpy in the basement. He was cleaning a pistol he hadn't fired in months. "We need to talk," Bumpy said. Juno didn't look up. "About Delroy Mosley." Juno's hand stopped. The silence between them was old. Heavy. "Earned. You never told me," Bumpy said. "I handled it," Juno replied quietly. "You handled the body," Bumpy said. "Not the truth." Juno set the pistol down carefully. "October 53, he said. County house on 138th. $800 missing. I sent 2 boys. They grabbed the wrong kid." Bumpy closed his eyes. "They realized it too late," Juno continued. "Panicked. Left him." "How old?" 19. Bumpy nodded slowly. "My city," he said. "My rules. My war." Neither man tried to absolve himself. There was no point. Upstairs, Nat's intelligence was taking shape. Vinny Eyes hadn't rushed Clarence. He'd circled him. 5 weeks earlier, he approached Clarence outside Mount Olivet Baptist Church after Sunday service. 7 minutes. No shouting. No threats. Just words placed carefully. Clarence walked away angry. Vinny came back the next Sunday. Then again. Each time, the conversations lasted longer. 2 weeks before the stake, Clarence met Vinny in a diner in the Bronx. Neutral ground. No witnesses who mattered. That was where it tipped. The Italians hadn't paid Clarence. They didn't need to. They gave him something money couldn't touch. A target. By 7:30 p.m., the sun was gone and Harlem was folding in on itself for the night. Juno's men finally found Clarence Mosley in a rooming house on 143rd Street. He was packing one suitcase. No pictures. No kipsakis. Just clothes and the tools of a man who never planned to come back. When the door came off its hinges, Clarence didn't scream. He didn't run. He looked up and nodded once. "Took you long enough," he said. They brought him through the back door of the Red Rooster after closing. The kitchen smelled like bleach and cold steel. Every member of the staff had been summoned. 12 people standing against tiled walls, eyes wide, hands folded, not knowing whether they were witnesses or future corpses. Clarence stood in the center of the room, wrists bound. Bumpy entered last. His footsteps echoed. For a long moment, no one spoke. "You should be dead," Clarence said finally. "I know," Bumpy replied. "Glass would have done it. Alcatraz taught me how to taste lies," Bumpy said, "and how to survive them." Clarence laughed, sharp and broken. "You don't even remember him," he said. "My brother. I remember now." "Now," Clarence snapped. 8 years too late. Bumpy stepped closer. "He was innocent," Bumpy said, "and he died because of my operation." Clarence blinked. "I didn't order it," Bumpy continued. "But I own it." The admission landed heavier than denial ever could. "You poisoned my food," Bumpy said. "In my city. At my table." Clarence lifted his chin. "I would have done it again." Bumpy turned. Opened the freezer. The walk-in freezer door swung wide, breathing out white air like a warning. Clarence's confidence cracked. "Wait," he said. "Please. You made this kitchen a weapon," Bumpy said. "Now it teaches you." They dragged him inside. The door closed. The screaming lasted almost an hour. The screaming didn't stop all at once. It thinned. At first, it was rage, hands slamming metal, a voice tearing itself raw. Then it became bargaining. Promises. Apologies that came too late to matter. After that, it turned into something quieter. Something animal. By the time the sounds faded, no one in the kitchen was watching the freezer door anymore. They didn't need to. Bumpy stood near the prep table, hands folded behind his back, eyes fixed on nothing. He didn't look satisfied. He didn't look angry. He looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Every member of the staff had been summoned. 12 people standing against tiled walls, eyes wide, hands folded, not knowing whether they were witnesses or future corpses. Clarence stood in the center of the room, wrists bound. Bumpy entered last. His footsteps echoed. For a long moment, no one spoke. "You should be dead," Clarence said finally. "I know," Bumpy replied. "Glass would have done it. Alcatraz taught me how to taste lies," Bumpy said, "and how to survive them." Clarence laughed, sharp and broken. "You don't even remember him," he said. "My brother. I remember now." "Now," Clarence snapped. 8 years too late. Bumpy stepped closer. "He was innocent," Bumpy said, "and he died because of my operation." Clarence blinked. "I didn't order it," Bumpy continued. "But I own it." The admission landed heavier than denial ever could. "You poisoned my food," Bumpy said. "In my city. At my table." Clarence lifted his chin. "I would have done it again." Bumpy turned, opened the freezer. The walk-in freezer door swung wide, breathing out white air like a warning. Clarence's confidence cracked. "Wait," he said. "Please. You made this kitchen a weapon," Bumpy said. "Now it teaches you." They dragged him inside. The door closed. The screaming lasted almost an hour. The screaming didn't stop all at once. It thinned. At first, it was rage, hands slamming metal, a voice tearing itself raw. Then it became bargaining. Promises. Apologies that came too late to matter. After that, it turned into something quieter. Something animal. By the time the sounds faded, no one in the kitchen was watching the freezer door anymore. They didn't need to. Bumpy stood near the prep table, hands folded behind his back, eyes fixed on nothing. He didn't look satisfied. He didn't look angry. He looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. 8 hours, he said calmly. "He'll live." Juno glanced at him. "Barely. That's the point." No one argued. At 6:15 the next morning, the Red Rooster opened its back door to a gray Harlem dawn. The freezer was opened slowly, like a tomb. Clarence Mosley was curled in the corner. Alive, but no longer whole. His lips were blue. His breath came in shallow, uneven pulls. His hands, those precise hands that once turned raw meat into art, were blackened, stiff, ruined. Frostbite had taken what anger never could. A doctor arrived who asked no questions. Clarence survived. He would never cook again. As the doctor worked, Bumpy stood over him. Not looming, not threatening, just present. "You're leaving New York," Bumpy said. "Tonight." Clarence tried to speak. Couldn't. "If I see your face north of Philadelphia," Bumpy continued, "you die." He reached into his coat and placed an envelope on Clarence's chest. "There's money inside. Enough for somewhere warm. Somewhere new." Clarence's eyes filled, not with gratitude, not with relief, but with confusion. "I'm not doing this for you," Bumpy said. "I'm doing it for your brother." Bumpy paused. "The pine box," he added. "By the end of the month, he'll have a proper headstone." He turned and left. No speeches. No witnesses needed. Clarence Mosley left New York 3 days later on a Greyhound bus, hands wrapped in bandages, future erased. He settled in Miami. Found work as a dishwasher, the only kitchen job his hands could manage. At night, when steam filled the room and the cold memory crept back into his bones, he would stare at his fingers and remember the freezer. He never understood Bumpy Johnson, but he never came back to Harlem. The story spread anyway. The chef, the glass, the freezer. By the end of the week, every kitchen in the borough knew it. Not as gossip, as instruction. Vinny Eyes received a package at his social club. Inside was a steak knife frozen solid, and a note in Bumpy's handwriting. "The kitchen is closed. Stay out of Harlem." Frank Costello's people never pushed north again. On a cold December morning, a marble headstone was installed at Woodlawn Cemetery. Delroy Mosley, 1934 to 1953. Remembered always. Bumpy Johnson visited once. Alone. He stood there for 11 minutes. Said nothing. Left a single white rose. Then he walked away. Because power doesn't erase guilt. It just gives you fewer places to hide it. Revenge never balances scales. It only adds weight. And some men carry that weight forever. If this story hit different, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Next time, we're telling the story of the room with 15 guns pointed at Bumpy Johnson and how he walked out with an apology and a business deal. Drop a comment below. Was Bumpy right to spare Clarence, or should the freezer door have stayed closed? I read every single one. And remember, in Harlem, the walls had ears, the kitchens had secrets, and Bumpy Johnson always found the truth, one way or another.